When Donald Trump announced that he'll be doing a town hall with CNN in New Hampshire, there were groans from both sides of the political divide. To the conservatives, he'll be walking into a lion's den and in danger of damaging himself further. To the leftists, Donald Trump remained their worst nightmare, and any exposure given to him would be considered bad. What was the outcome and the aftermath of the town hall? Now, very good day to all the listeners out there. Welcome to another episode of Simon Says. We have Lyra here today.
Hello, everyone.
And Lyra, we're just thinking about what's happening around the world. I mean, what's interesting in the news media. And we just kept coming back to this CNN town hall, right?
Yes.
And I was quite eager to do this because I know in Malaysia, people will not usually get a balanced perspective. And I guess that's what we're trying to do, right?
That's right.
And of course, if you follow our show, you know that we are somewhat supportive of Donald Trump. We're not into the personality cult or things like that, but just look at what happened 2 years after he stepped down. The whole world was in disarray.
Yeah.
And so from that point of view, I began to see people kind of whispering, when Donald Trump was around, it was better, the bank was not crushing and things like that. Of course, nobody will come out in the daylight and say we support Donald Trump, especially in Malaysia, because the Republican Party and him, they have been demonized by the mainstream media. But I thought it was very, very interesting, and that's what we want to talk about. But before we get your initial take, because Lyra, I would like to hear that. I was just reading newspaper around Malaysia, and of course, I don't think they're direct reporting. They kind of get from AP or things like that. So here's one headline from The Sun. It reads, "Combative Trump appears on CNN town hall." Actually, it wasn't that bad, right? The headline.
No, yeah, I mean, I guess it sounds like he is full of spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it wasn't that, it wasn't as dismissive, and they were like kind of, I just felt like generally they were coming to some sort of realizations. But before we get into all these things, maybe Lyra, give us your initial take on the whole saga and, all the analysis after that.
No, I think before the show, we were just talking about, I haven't really read into that part, but I felt it was so interesting that CNN, of all the news network, they would invite Donald Trump. So it was really interesting. I mean, and we're going to talk about why the network director decided to invite him.
Yep.
But I was just doing some comparative studies between what the mainstream media will be saying as well as what the alternative media will be saying. Of course, alternative media will be like cheering in on and stuff like that. But what's interesting is because when you have watched the video and when you read articles, it just gives you like a different kind of perspective. And this one is from the New York Times. And we know that they are very, very liberal. So the headlines reads 5 takeaways from Trump's unruly CNN town hall. So they started off with...
Unruly.
Yeah. They started off with Donald Trump is still Donald Trump. Then I was thinking, what do you mean? I mean, yeah.
So is that a positive, you think?
I felt like it was a bit of sarcastic note.
Backhanded compliment.
Yeah, indeed. And then it was really the part where they just started off by saying this, Trump won't let go of his lies about 2020 or January 6th. And then you begin to see a lot of hypocrisy that comes out of this whole CNN supporters, that they were saying, why did he have to like continue on and on about the election, the stolen election, the lies? And hello, if you watch the video in full, not out of context, you know that he's actually been asked on and on and on about January 6th.
Yep.
And then it was so interesting that because like the New York Times, they just say, oh, he came with this he came armed with this whole bunch of lies and just saying that this is that. But in fact, he actually just showed proof.
Yep.
So I think the audience will just have to be wise. You can't mistaken like fear for wisdom. I think that's really something that when you read about this whole thing, I think that's the whole theme that really just comes back to me. And I felt it was so interesting that it really gives a fresh take to this whole news cycle.
Yeah, Lyra, just listening to you, I was reminded, we always say these days there's a lot of very, very inaccurate and biased reporting because people just kind of use very selective quote. And of course, we know that it is very rampant in Malaysia. People always say, oh, I didn't say that. And then later you show the whole video. And even then they will say, people will just say, oh, that person is not me.
Yeah.
I've been misquoted. Those kind of things. But unfortunately, I think we have come to the stage where we just have to kind of catch people. And so, by the way, for this whole episode of the town hall, you can see the whole entire episode YouTube anyway. So you can, I encourage everyone to go there. And it is, to me, it's kind of like entertainment, because you see the mainstream media being bashed and put to their places because they are the ones that have been telling all kind of lies. So watch the entire show, make your own mind who is right and who is wrong. But later on, we're just going to show you some clips to give you a gist of that. Now, of course, CNN, Donald Trump always called them fake news network.
Yep.
And now you kind of mentioned people were surprised why CNN, right?
Yeah.
And so this was from Guardian a day later, and they said CNN. Why did they allow him? Okay.
Yeah.
CNN said it was hosting Trump because he is a clear front runner of the Republican nomination to face Joe Biden next year. So I don't know. We can say backhanded compliment, but increasingly it looks like the leftists, the Democrat, they are coming to an awareness, almost an acceptance that Donald Trump is not going away.
Yeah.
And like it or not, they had to face him again.
Yeah, that he's a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, indeed. And of course, the weeks leading up to this town hall, he just kind of expanded his lead within the Republican. Like his closest challenger, the yet undeclared Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, I think now he was leading like 50+% to 20+%. It's like getting wider and wider. I remember at the beginning of December, DeSantis was the front runner.
Yeah.
It's shocking after indictment. After recently there was a civil suit case over something happened 30 years ago, and this town hall, all the things people thought would damage him, and yet the poll kept improving. What do you think? Why do you think it is like that?
Well, I think one, it really just goes to show that the people are coming to an awareness. Not just the leftists, not just the Democrats. I think increasingly people are getting frustrated, especially when with like collapse of 3 major banks in the United States, then we are sending more and more funds to Ukraine. And all these sort of things, the hardship, I think really just cause suddenly your brain starts functioning again.
Yeah, and it's a bit like what we discussed in the Tucker episode, right? Eventually, people still want the truth. And, we always talk about Matrix and the analogy. At some point, people will want the red pill. They will want the truth. And that's what we are hoping people who watch the podcast, YouTube, or however you consume this, you will really take the time to differentiate the truth from the untruth.
Yep.
If we can use that word. Now, before we show you some clips, just talking about the show itself, the rating was actually a smashing success. 3.3 million viewers. That's higher than any of the Fox program after Tucker left. And very important, 780,000. And this is a very critical demographic, 25 years old to 45 years old. Why? They are considered the most influential, the most affluent, probably with the most, they have children probably in high school, university. So they have that kind of, just a higher degree of influence, I would say. So they always watch this demographic. And so, you look at that, it's considered a corporate win, right, for CNN. And yet, later on, there was reporting a lot of their staff, they basically become unhinged, right? And we can spend one entire episode on that, but more on that later on.
It just reminds me of the episode where the Twitter employees had a meltdown when Elon Musk took over.
It's the same. It is very, very similar. But maybe I just kind of quote from the CEO of CNN, okay, Chris Leach, okay, and he was just saying that, despite all the criticism from internal, he said, look, covering Trump will continue to be messy and tricky. Well, messy and tricky for them, but not for everyone else.
Yep.
But it is our job. Adding, America was served very well by what we did last night. Yeah, I agree. But then Brian Stelter, who was from CNN, he commented, many CNN employees strongly disagree. You are a news media. You cannot take an opposing view. Then what kind of media are you? So I think it just shows the lousiness and the bias. They always claim they were not biased, but this time I think they just fully manifest. But we will talk about that a bit later. Okay, I think now we want to show some clips, short clips. Again, we encourage all listeners and viewers go and watch the entire thing. It's very, very entertaining, and it will give you really a perspective how the mainstream media are behaving. And the crowd there, they knew. They were cheering for the right person. But anyway, let's look at clip number 1 first, and then we'll look at clip number 2. Okay, play clip 1.
I was negotiating with NARA. Do you know what NARA is?
The National Archives.
Extremely left group of people. Extremely left. And I was negotiating with them. All of a sudden, they raided my house. They didn't raid the house of Joe Biden. They didn't raid Obama.
But Joe Biden didn't ignore a subpoena to get those documents back like you did.
And so that's the question. 1,850 boxes.
But that's the question that investigators have, I think, is why you held on to those documents when you knew the federal government was seeking them and then had given you a subpoena to return them.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Can I talk?
Yeah, what's the answer?
Do you mind?
I would like for you to answer the question.
Okay, it's very simple to answer.
That's why I asked it.
It's very simple to, you're a nasty person, I'll tell you.
You are a nasty person. And people will kind of hear that and say, oh, that's why Trump is very, very bad. But I mean, my first reaction when I saw this was just how rude she was.
Yeah,
she was like, she kept interrupting, and actually immediately after, doing the live town hall, Twitter was just kind of running a buzz, and most of them were slamming Caitlyn because they were like, hey, you're supposed to be a moderator, you're supposed to be someone asking questions, but you're like interjecting all the time.
Interrogating him.
Yeah. But again, you look at the whole demeanor of Trump, and of course, for those who are not aware, Trump was talking about the time when certain documents were seized from his residence, and the National Archives say he kept classified information. I mean, that doesn't matter the fact that the president could declassify anything during his term anytime he wants. So he said he was negotiating, and all of a sudden they show up.
Yeah.
So, but they don't do that with the Democrat president. They don't do that with other people because, again, he was a threat. And they somehow want to paint a whole picture. And I think it's the same thing. They want to paint, especially to the neutral, because, in every election, the Democrats have their gang, Republicans have their gang, but then you have a large percentage of
the
undecided, the independent. And we're just talking about in Malaysia, right? The independent are going to be the largest voting segment. So it's so important that you go and persuade them. So they were hoping that by creating an impression that he was a damaged goods, people wouldn't vote. But you see, the polling kept going up. So I think what you say was correct, that people are getting smarter. People can discern already the bullshit that is around. After a few years of hardship, all the bullshit detector is kind of being sharpened.
But then you still get a group of people like the liberals.
Yep.
That they will just say, well, you say that there were cheers, which is true. I mean, you can hear it from the crowd. But then the argument would be the cheers actually just reveal the current psyche of the Republican base. Basically, they were eager for confrontation. But hello, you have been attacked by someone who is supposed to be a moderator, and you're just stating the truth. So what's wrong with that?
Yeah, and what's wrong with Donald Trump fighting back? Because I think that's why his base supported him, because he was willing to stand up to them, not like many politicians, whether in US or in Malaysia. I mean, in Malaysia, we always have politicians who will say they will fight for us, but then when the first challenge comes, they will just say, oh, actually, I was misquoted or whatever. and that's why people are kind of frustrated. And when you reach that kind of situation, they'll be like, either party is useless. You see that sense in Australia, in UK.
Yep.
But in US, they have this person who is like a wrecking ball that energizes the whole political sphere. So it's very interesting. And yeah, I mean, people kind of cheer him and didn't boo him when he kind of told her off, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's like how do you turn it into a positive for the moderator? All right, maybe let's look at the second clip. And second clip is interesting because, okay, let's play and
I
then
think that's one of my favorite clips.
Okay, play clip 2.
by a crazy woman named Nancy Pelosi.
But the question here is, would you give Ukraine weapons and funding if you were
I
elected?
would sit down. Let me just put it a nicer way. If I'm president, I will have that war settled in 1 day, 24 hours.
How would you settle that war in 1 day?
Because I'll meet with Putin, I'll meet with Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over. It'll be absolutely over.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing. I think in terms of getting it settled so we stop killing all these people and breaking down this country. Now,
quite a bit of cheer from the crowd. And now, of course, this is nothing new. He has said it a few times already that he could settle the war in 1 day. And I know a lot of people will be like, this is the king of bullshit and things like that. But what's your take on this?
No, I think it was so amazing that because what he stated basically is really like raising a fist to the globalists.
Yep.
Because I mean, in the last episode, we talked about Uniparty and stuff like that. So basically, you have this large base of rhino, Republican namely, that really just wanted to support on and on the Ukraine war, but for what purposes?
Yep.
So the fact that he actually stated the truth, that actually I don't think of it as winning. I mean, I just want to stop this whole thing and I just want to get it settled. That really shows a quality of the leadership that you really want in a country. And that really shows that he has that heart for American. So I think that was really, I mean, I will give my hats off for him. I mean, that's really, honestly, one of my favorite clip within the video.
Yeah, and one of the things really, I think this is an important point for those of us in Asia and outside America. People always say, look, America have been like, sort of want to change regime, change governments, in Latin America, in Central Asia, over the years, they've been interfering with military, political, financial pressure. But here come Trump, who doesn't want to do all these things, and he'll be like, it's not in the interest of America, it's not in America's interest to do all these things, but we want everyone to live in peace. And in his 4 years, not a single war was declared.
Yeah, and remember the part where he really just like decisively pulled out from Paris Climate Accord, and people thought, well, what are you doing and stuff like that, and really just proved to be a scam.
Exactly. So he was really going against the whole globalists, and so at that time, of course, people can still say, oh, that's very bad. But now we're in a very different climate, a very oppressive economic climate, and even people are saying, look, America doesn't even have enough money for their own domestic development. Why do you want to spend billions outside for a war that has very little interest? That's why I really like the statement. I don't think in terms of winning or losing, because that's not my issue. My issue is I don't want the killing to continue. I don't want the trade embargo. I don't want the whole supply and demand that is causing price soaring all around the world, because that has impact over the current economy also.
Yeah, and it also just goes to show how CNN, they was just so willing for him to take a fall. I mean, just waiting for him to make the wrong move and then to see if he's really like friends of Putin.
I think it's getting a bit stale and old. I mean, it's like they haven't learned anything at all. Remember 2016, they tried to say he's a Russian agent, Russian spy. It's so beyond ridiculous when you look at what he's doing. He's not friends. I mean, he respects strength, but he's always looking at the interests of his own nation. So, I mean, I just find it very interesting that they are recycling the old points, and yet people are falling into that. So that's why we need to make sure we don't fall into this kind of cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we're going to finish off now by talking about the aftermath, okay? And of course, after that, I mean, just so many interesting developments. And in fact, so many people, even his own supporter initially was very skeptical, and he was like, I think he was posting on Truth Social, he said, maybe it will be a disaster. I don't know. He was like kind of playing around. But you look at his performance, he is so... I mean, he was like, if anything, he is going to be very well prepared to fight anything that the other side is going to throw at him, because they're going to throw everything, ethical or unethical. Look at all the barrage of legal case which is just ridiculous. But I believe eventually he will prevail in his appeal. But it's very vexing to see the two-tier justice system that is happening right now. But what are some of the response that you have been, what did you enjoy reading? You know, I mean, there's so many. I have chosen some, but you have found anything?
Yeah, like AOC.
Yeah. AOC, that was one of my favorite ones. You want to read what she say?
No, she basically just say CNN should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah.
Like,
But why?
ridiculous. I mean, she was just basically just saying that. I mean, why?
Because they couldn't handle him?
Yeah.
Or is it? Or I mean, actually, maybe let's read what AOC say. Okay.
Yep.
It says CNN should be ashamed of themselves. AOC tweeted, "They have lost total control of this town hall to again be manipulated into platforming election disinformation defenses of January 6th and public attack on sexual abuse victim. The audience is cheering him and laughing at the host." I mean, it's like all these things they try to manufacture against him, and you can see the audience are not buying it. And you can see the general public are not buying it through the polling data. But I was just trying to read into what she said. It seems like there is a degree of resignation kind of thing. It's like, oh man, Trump is coming back again and he's as strong as ever. We couldn't really contain. I felt like that was the underlining message. It's like, I don't think any moderator could have handled him.
Yep.
Because he was determined not to give face to them. And I don't care how good you are, he will just tell them off.
Yeah, but something about him sort of changed, don't you think?
He is not. It's like you couldn't really trigger him as much. I felt that.
There's a different sense of maturity. I really felt like it was so well behaved. It was so well thought of, and how he was gonna make that sort of comeback.
Yeah, and I think then of course you can look at what CNN even did, like a whole panel response, and I mean they say many things, you know, from I think you already mentioned some of the points in New York Times. So one of them say something which is very interesting, and it's almost like an involuntary statement, and the statement is Trump is as strong as ever, and I think slowly but surely they're coming to a realization that we are seeing a version 2.0 which is even more powerful than 2016. So I think this all kind of tie in with what Tucker Carlson said, right? And, you know, right after he was fired, we did one episode on that. I'm just going to read one quote and then I think we're going to wrap up already. And he said this, you know, when talk about certain things cannot be said, cannot be discussed, and he said, and people want the truth. And this is why he said, the people in charge, the globalists, etc., they know this. That's why they are hysterical, they are aggressive, they are afraid. They've given up persuasion. So that's what we saw, right? They don't even want to talk about it. They just want to cut in until he has to tell her off. And they are resorting to force, but it won't work. Why it won't work is because people will become smarter. People will find out the truth for themselves. And I think we see a glimpse of that in the town hall. Do you feel?
I do. And I mean, I really, really just like what Donald Trump himself, what he posted on Truth social media, that he basically, like, literally stated out the gist of this, that it says the radical left screamed, take it down, during the show, because they saw that I was making so many important points on the border.
Too late.
Energy independence, the Afghanistan catastrophe, inflation, the economy, Russia, Ukraine, and so much more. So it really just goes back to what you were saying just now, that the left wouldn't want to hear all this thing. I mean, they knew that they weren't going to win on this war of persuasion. Might as well just, like, shut up.
A very interesting point you made here, because those are all the important policy points, but Caitlin was not asking him all these things, but he managed to weave it in anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like that I mean, he really came with a strategy, and, you know, just think about sports game, you know, sometimes you have matchup, and sometimes you see a team totally underperform. It's because they didn't come with the right plan. I think Donald Trump came with the right plan today. He wanted to present the right policy, but at the same time, he wanted to show how unhinged they are. And I think he achieved both points. in the town hall.
I mean, it's really like a free run on the presidential campaign and pre-presidential campaign.
Yep. So anyway, for those of you, I really encourage you to go and watch the whole thing. Maybe we can find a link and put in our description.
Yeah, maybe. I think we
Yeah,
could.
it's not that long. And yeah, so go have it. And this is just kind of our take on the international news this week. So until next time,
Yep.
bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.